Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I call out of recess Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals hearing on petition number 21P 1566, Sauk Valley Hydrogen LLC's request for special use permit to construct a solar energy system in Nelson Township. For those of you who may have lost it but are listening on YouTube, if you want to join us and participate on Zoom, the meeting ID is 915-3923-9154. The password is 209840. If you don't want to participate, but you want to view us and listen to us, you can go to www.youtube.com. In the search bar, type in Lee County IL Zoning Board of Appeals and find the session you want. If you're trying to listen to us tonight, of course, it'll be March 16th, and you should then be able to see and hear us on your computer screen. If you need technical assistance for any of this, Zoning Officer Duffy has a technical assistance hotline, 815-973-3449. I note the presence in the courtroom of the chair of the ZBA, Mr. Forster, its vice chair, Mr. Burrow, Mr. Bothy, Mr. Hughes, Mr. Pratt, Mr. Meyer are all present. I note that Ms. Duffy is being a trooper tonight while she's a little under the weather. She is with us on Zoom. Her green energy alternate energy coordinator, Alice Hinkle, is present in the courtroom, as is the state's attorney, Mr. Boonstra. Here's that Mr. Blazer, the petitioner's attorney, is with us on Zoom. There are two petitioners' representatives in the courtroom, as well as Jonathan from Lee County IT, the court reporter, myself. That makes 13 of us in the courtroom. There are no interested parties that showed up this evening. And as I said, on Zoom are Ms. Duffy and Mr. Blazer. I guess that's it. So, Mr. Blazer, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Judge. Thank you.
Great. Okay. I just want to make sure you're with us. When we left off, you had called a witness and indicated you wanted to call one or more other ones. So please, you go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. And good evening, all. I'll call Mr. Joel Schroeder.
Okay. Mr. Schroeder, you want to stand wherever you want. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Have a seat. Another tall guy, it's got to fit your knees under there.
I can't see him, Judge, so you'll have to let me know when I can proceed.
Hey, you may.
Thank you, sir. Could you state your name, please, and spell your last name?
My name is Joel Schroeder. Last name is spelled Schroeder.
Mr. Schroeder, could you give us your educational background following high school, please?
Yes, I have a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering from Iowa State University and an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management.
And could you summarize for us your work experience after college?
My work experience includes a variety of different positions, all in developing various forms of power generation. I've evolved from being a project engineer to project manager to project director. And now I am the Senior Vice President of Engineering for Invenergy. I've been with Invenergy almost 18 years, and with Invenergy have participated in leading the direct development, engineering, construction of wind projects, solar projects, gas-fired projects, combined cycle, simple cycle, LNG to power projects, among other things. And now am focused on leading the overall engineering group for Invenergy, which includes the development of hydrogen.
And could you describe your role with respect to the Sauk Valley Hydrogen Project?
I have overall responsibility for the development, engineering, and construction of the project. I lead the team that is conducting this project.
Thank you. I'd like to go over with you a number of the questions that came up during Mr. Lil's testimony on Monday. Let's start with the first one, which is why we're asking for certain waivers from certain provisions of the Lee County zoning ordinance instead of variances. Mr. Schroeder, do any of the requested waivers constitute a request to use the 5 acres that we're looking to use in a way that is otherwise prohibited by the Lee County zoning ordinance?
They do not.
All right. And are you aware that solar and power generation facilities and industrial manufacturing plants are all the types of uses that are allowed as special uses in the I3 zoning district in Lee County?
To my knowledge, yes, they are.
All right. Do any of the requested waivers result from some hardship unique to the specific parcel of property, the 5 acres that we're talking about, that makes it impossible to otherwise meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance?
Not that I am aware of.
All right. Now, several of these waivers are being requested because they simply don't apply to this industrial parcel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. I don't know if Alice is still there working the PowerPoint, but if she is, or if someone is, could we pull up the list of waivers from the PowerPoint?
Actually, Alice was not running the PowerPoint. Their IT specialist, Jonathan, is, and I don't know if
okay.
he's still got it. I don't know if he's still got it on there or not. Just a minute. Let's
Yeah.
see if we can solve the, just to go
If
get
it-
it.
Yeah, if he doesn't judge, I can read them out. That's fine. We don't have to wait. That's okay.
Alice, don't worry about it.
And it looks like several of the board members have the printout anyway. So I'm going to go through these one at a time, Mr. Schroeder. The first one is, and the letter and number designations are designation references to the special use, to the solar ordinance. So the first one is D1B, other standards and codes. And that's the requirement that all electrical components of the SES, the solar energy system, must have an underwriter's laboratories listing. Now, am I correct? There is no time frame as to when that UL listing is to be obtained, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And we've indicated both in the PowerPoint and in our application, and Mr. Lil testified on Monday, that we expect that not all of the solar system components will have a UL listing at the time of submitting the building permit application.
That is correct.
Is that correct? All right.
Yes.
Now, the company that manufactures the trackers is a company called Nextracker. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And who is Nextracker?
Nextracker is a company based out of California, and they're actually the world's largest manufacturer of solar array trackers. They've delivered over 60 gigawatts. That's 60,000 megawatts of solar trackers to date.
All right. And I see now we have the waivers. Thank you very much. And as I understand from Mr. Lil's testimony on Monday, this waiver request with respect to UL certification of certain components of the project is just temporary, correct? It's not a you're not asking for a permanent waiver, am I correct?
That is correct.
All right. And is all of the equipment that isn't currently UL certified undergoing the review required to become UL certified?
That is our understanding, yes.
All right. And we can't pull this up on the screen, but those of you who have a copy of our application, and I believe you have it as well, Mr. Schroeder, if you could refer to Appendix S of the application, could you tell us what that is?
Appendix S is an email that we received from Nextracker that highlights their planned schedule for obtaining the UL certifications for their various components.
All right. And again, when you're talking about various components, you're not talking all the components. Some of them already do have UL certification. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we're just talking a a subset of the components that will go into the solar system. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Do you happen to have Exhibit S in front of you?
I do.
All right. And could you just describe for us what Nextracker provided here, the description of the equipment, why it's not currently UL certified, when it's anticipated to be UL certified, and what steps will be taken in the interim?
So which Mr. Lill referred to on Monday is the full tracker. Those are the longer tracker rows on the site layout. That is a production type tracker system, and they have implemented a special module which will use sunlight to power the tracker motors. And so they're currently working on getting UL certification for that component of the system. And with this email, that's actually a fairly short time frame when they expect to receive the UL certification for this configuration. And that's indicated by Nextracker as being July of 2022.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
I say there's two other columns listed in Exhibit S. The second column is the half row trackers, and that's Nextracker's next generation tracker. And so that product is a new product, and it's undergoing UL certification in its entirety. And so that's where we're only planning at this point to utilize 2 of those trackers. And that has a longer time frame for UL certification because there's more work, more components that Nextracker has to submit to the UL certification. And what they've indicated to us is that they may receive UL certification by the end of 2022, or it could be the first half of 2023. And finally, Nextracker is providing 65 kilowatt DC optimizers. This is
what are those?
It's a proven product, so it's not a new product. They're making larger DC optimizers, and what this does is the rows of panels enter into the DC optimizer, and it's able to control the voltage. And what they do is they control the voltage to optimize the power production of the panels. As you have different amounts of irradiance on the panels, they perform differently. And so it's always searching for what is that output voltage of the panels to maximize the power out of the row of panels. And so you disperse these optimizers throughout the field. And so it's able to look at each row and optimize the power production out of that row. And so this is Nextracker looking at the next generation, the larger optimizers. As panels become more efficient and produce more power, they have to look at increasing the size of their product. So this is the next generation of their product. And they've indicated that's currently well underway with the certification process, and they expect to see that certification in July of 2022 if all goes well.
And the prior version of this product is already UL certified, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. Let's go to the next one, which is also up on the screen here, road use agreements. And as Mr. Lill testified on Monday, Sauk Valley is anticipating 25 to 35 truck trips in total, not daily, but in total for the entire construction of this project. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And none of those trucks will require either oversize or overweight permits. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And is the request based on the fact that the request to waive the road use agreement requirement based on the limited number of truck trips and the fact that no oversize or overweight loads will be required?
That's correct. We expect a very small amount of trucks delivering goods and materials to this project site. In addition, the site is located quite close to Interstate 88. There are improved roads leading from I-88 to the construction site. It consists of a state highway as well as Nelson Township Road. And in addition, this is a proven route that has been utilized through the construction of the Nelson Energy Center, which had significant amounts of truck traffic to construct that facility, as well as the ongoing construction of the Nelson expansion.
Thank you. All right, if we could go to the next page, please. All right, the next three, actually, it's these two and the first one on the following one, all relate to stormwater management and minimization of disturbance to prime farmland. Obviously, we highlight that because it is one of the reasons why these three waivers are being requested, the fact that we're dealing with an industrially zoned parcel and not farmland.
That is correct.
All right. And does the Nelson Energy Facility itself, the existing and operating natural gas fired power plant, already have an existing stormwater management plan?
The Nelson Energy Center does have a stormwater management plan, which is not just a plan, it's also been implemented and it's been actively maintained and controlling the stormwater discharges from the entire Nelson Energy Center site.
And when you say the entire Nelson Energy Center site, does that include the approximately 5 acres on which this project is proposed to be built?
It does, yes.
All right. And does Sauk Valley Hydrogen itself independently intend to ensure compliance with the Nelson Energy stormwater management plan with respect to this project?
Yes, it does.
Am I correct? Sauk Valley has in fact submitted, however, as part of its SUP application, a stormwater pollution prevention plan for construction. Is that correct?
That is correct. It was submitted in the application as Appendix G.
There we go. Okay, thank you. All right, if we could go to the next one, please. We covered the one at the top. The next one is agricultural impact mitigation agreement. And again, am I correct that the reason we're asking for a waiver of this one is because this is not agricultural property?
That's correct. During the construction of the Nelson Energy site, the property was converted from agricultural use over to an industrial use. The site was heavily modified, graded to support the construction of the existing power facility that's on site. And this particular location was graded and used as parking for the construction of the original facility and ongoing construction activities at the site.
Thank you. All right, if we could go to the next one, please. This is modification to the SES, and I think there might have been a little bit of confusion with respect to this one on Monday. So one question first. This SUP application seeks permission for an up to 845 kilowatt solar energy system and up to 24 kilogram per hour green hydrogen system. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is Sauk Valley requesting a waiver of either of those upper limits?
We are not.
All right. And by waiver, I mean a waiver in the future. Does Sauk Valley intend to increase that, either the 845 or the 24?
We have no plans to increase either the energy production or the hydrogen production level that we've requested.
All right. So what exactly is it that Sauk Valley is asking the Lee County to waive with respect to what we're calling modification to the SES?
So what we were asking for a waiver for is the prohibition of being able to upgrade the site. Seeing as we're using this as a demonstration facility, over time, solar technology will improve, and we'll use this as a demonstration facility in preparation for deploying certain equipment within our future solar construction projects. For instance, module technology is always increasing. It's becoming more efficient. And so we would over time likely replace the solar modules, which may be a different module, may increase the power, but we're not asking to increase beyond 845 kilowatts that we've requested in this application. In the first phases, we're likely to install slightly less than 845 kilowatts to support the electrolyzer operation. We may, on the solar trackers, may decide that there's a new version of the solar tracker that is more cost competitive, or we want to test how we construct it and operate it and its reliability, where we may look to replace the tracker. So what we're asking in this small, limited scale facility is the ability to make those changes without coming back to the zoning board for a special use permit approval.
Thank you. And then the last one, it relates to land evaluation site assessment, the LISA scoring. And the waiver here is being requested because LISA scoring, which applies to agricultural land, doesn't apply to this industrial facility. Is that correct?
That is correct. Given that the site has previously been converted from agricultural use, the LISA score does not apply. And we have a letter from.
That the Lee County Soil and Water Conservation District?
That is correct. It's included as an exhibit.
Appendix Q?
Appendix Q, yes.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to try and go through the rest of the questions that came up on Monday, hopefully in the order they were asked. There were a number of I think we're done with the PowerPoint if you'd like to take it down. There were a number of questions about cooling, both at the Nelson plant and for the proposed facility. Could you please explain cooling at Nelson and then cooling of the hydrogen at this proposed facility?
Right. There are two types of cooling that were referred to. The first type is cooling of the existing combustion turbine electrical generators at the Nelson Energy site. So the large electrical generators, when they operate, they create heat, and you have to remove the heat from those generators. There's two ways of removing that heat. You can use air and blow air over the generator to remove that heat. In large scale generators, what they found is using hydrogen is highly beneficial. It reduces the windage loss within the generators, as well as it's a much more efficient method of removing the heat that's created from the generator. So you have a loop of hydrogen within the generator that cycles through the generator, and there's a heat exchanger that sits in the bottom of the generator. And so as that hydrogen flows over, it goes through a heat exchanger in the generator, which then transfers that heat generated during the production of electricity and transfers that heat into a cooling water system, which then is routed out to ultimately the cooling tower that exists at Nelson. So the hydrogen that will generate within the electrolyzer of this proposed project would replace hydrogen that we're now having to purchase commercially from air gas. And so as the generator operates, there's seals which contain the hydrogen within the generator, and that hydrogen slowly leaks out of the generator. So we always have to maintain positive pressure inside the generator and replace that hydrogen. So that's one of the primary uses of this hydrogen that we'll generate on the site. There was also some discussion about cooling hydrogen at the electrolyzer facility, at the hydrogen production facility. And so during the generation of splitting the hydrogen atom from the oxygen atom in water, it's an exothermic process. And so there's heat generated by that electrolyzer. So similar to the radiator in your car, there's a cooling water loop that pulls the heat out of that electrolyzer and routes that water over to a radiator that's in another compartment, and then exhausts that heat that's generated into the environment. There was also some concerns related to the temperature of the electrolyzer. So the electrolyzer does create heat, but the electrolyzer is contained within a protective cabinet, which protects personnel as well as protects the system from the ambient conditions, the snow, the rain, the wind, the dirt. So that cabinet not only protects people from the heat that's generated by the electrolyzer, in addition, the heat that's generated by the electrolyzer due to the controls, the system doesn't get overly hot. The system will operate between 100 and 120 degrees F, and it will have protective controls that if it were to be detected that it's overheating, the system will shut itself down, de-energize the system to keep the equipment safe and protect any people.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. All right. Turning to another subject, there was another question on Monday about whether there is a contract with PJM, the electrical grid, or with ComEd. There in fact won't be a contract with PJM. Is that correct?
That's correct. PJM is the organization that oversees the operation of the bulk transmission system. And so the bulk transmission system would be utilized if this were an extremely large scale hydrogen facility. You've probably seen discussions related to PJM on your large solar farm applications. That's a large generation facility, just like the Nelson Energy Center is a large generating facility, and it has a transmission level interconnection into the ComEd transmission system, which is managed by PJM. To make that connection, Nelson Energy Center years ago had to go through a very detailed, expensive, and long process to implement that interconnection. That type of process does not apply to small loads and small generators. In this case, we're looking at up to 845 kilowatts of power generation. And so at that case, we've approached ComEd and said, we would like to connect to your distribution system. No different than if you had a farm with corn dryers on it, you're going to get your power from the ComEd three-phase distribution lines, and we're asking for a similar interconnection. In this case, we're also looking for the ability to export power as well as import power. So it'll work both ways. We'll have net metering. And so we have approached ComEd and they have done their studies and they said, yes, you can interconnect your project to the system. We don't currently have a contract with ComEd. We're in the process of finalizing that effort, but we'll ultimately have, rather than a contract with PJM, one with ComEd as the distribution utility, which will then give us permission, once we produce all the detailed engineering drawings, to connect and energize our systems, to power the electrolyzer from their system. And if the electrolyzer is turned off and we have the solar farm running, we can export that power to the system. The intention here is that generally the power generated by the solar farm will be consumed by the electrolyzer. And that's really the reason we're coupling these two together. But there will be no contract with PJM, and we will have a contract signed with ComEd to make that small scale interconnection.
All right. The next question on my list was about location of and repair of drain tile under this parking lot area. Why is that not necessary here?
So during the development of the original project, they would have evaluated all the drain tiles. They would have modified the drain tiles. In discussions with our operations staff, they are not aware during the last 20 years of any issues with drain tiles. And so there is no expectation that there are any drain tiles that exist on that corner of our property.
Next, we have communication interference and the fact that Sauk Valley did not commission a study with respect to communication interference. And I'll represent to you section E.13 of the county solar ordinance provides the following. The applicant shall verify that there will be no communication interference resulting from the SES project. Will this project cause any communication interference?
It will not.
And how do we know that?
So the solar farm is essentially far too short and too small to result in communication interfaces. The reality is, if there were to be a communication interface, you have the large Nelson Energy Center that sits next door, and it's been constructed for a number of years. It's been operating for approximately the last 10 years, and there are no existing communication issues in the area.
All right. Next, we have the subject of water from the Rock River. Mr. Lill testified on Monday that this facility will use a small amount per day of water. Will this facility, in fact, be drawing any water from the Rock River?
The Sauk Valley project will not have any type of interconnection to the Rock River.
How will it get its water?
So the existing Nelson Energy Center does have an intake from the Rock River, and so it withdraws water from the Rock River, runs it through a treatment system on site, and utilizes that water for cooling purposes as well as steam generation purposes.
So the Sauk Valley project would use a portion of the water that the Nelson facility draws from the Rock River. Am I correct?
That is correct. So the Nelson Energy Center produces what is called demineralized water. So for the production of steam, they have a process where they remove all the dissolved minerals that are in the water and utilize that for steam. That's the same water which the hydrogen facility needs to utilize. And so the Nelson Energy Center has a large treatment facility with excess capacity in it. And so we're looking to utilize just a very small fraction of its treatment capacity. And what was testified on Monday was that it's approximately 1 GPM per electrolyzer. And so if we were to install 4 electrolyzers, that would result in the consumption of approximately 4 GPM of water.
GPMs, gallons per minute?
That is correct.
And generally speaking, do you know how much water the Nelson facility overall draws from the river?
So it depends on the time of the year. It has the capacity to withdraw 3,000 GPM from the Rock River. The bulk of that water is utilized for cooling purposes in the cooling towers that are on site. And a portion of that is lost due to evaporation during the cooling process. And the majority of the water is then returned to the Rock River. So, the electrolyzer just represents a very small fraction of that water consumption that the Nelson Energy Center has. I mean, even if you were to compare the amount of water, the 5 GPM, that's approximately the amount of water which, a residential shower requires. A shower is typically between 2.5 gallons per minute and 5 gallons per minute, depending on whether you have a low flow shower head.
All right. Now let's go to the glare study, which is Appendix N to the application. And the question came up about the definition of discrete observation receptors. Could you explain what that is, along with the other measurement points in the glare study, Appendix N?
Sure. The glare study identified a number of receptors where it modeled whether there would be glare on those receptors. So with the exception of the discrete receptor point, the other receptors are long linear lines. It's the airport, it's the railroad tracks, it's Interstate 88, it's Nelson Road. And there was one discrete receptor point. And what that is it's the neighbor's house that's located to the northwest of the project site. And so they had modeled that location just to demonstrate in this modeling software that there was no glare resulting from this facility at that location.
Thank you. Next, we have the question of consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources regarding historic sites. Was that already done when the Nelson plant was developed?
That is correct. There was full consultation with the IDNR during the early development of the project, and there were no known historical finds found on the project site.
And that includes the 5 acres where this project is proposed to be located?
That is correct.
All right. Now let's talk about height. There were a lot of questions about how tall this thing will be. The county solar ordinance, which is section D1D, imposes a 20-foot height limit on solar projects. Will this project comply with that limit?
Yes, it will.
There was a lot of discussion with Mr. Lill about 10 feet. Could you explain what the 10 feet is?
Sure. We expect that the solar panels, when they rotate on the tracker, they won't exceed 10 feet in height. So while the limit is 20, we expect, based on final design parameters, that the highest point will be well below 10 feet.
Now, typically, and I think in this county's experience as well, when panels for a utility scale solar project rotate to their highest point, they're taller than 10 feet. Why will this one be shorter?
So there's 2 models of trackers. You can install a tracker which has 2 panels in portrait or 1 panel in portrait. So think of it like a sheet of paper. When you hold it vertically, that's the portrait mode. And so with a single panel in portrait, it has a much lower profile than if you were to install larger trackers, which allow you to put 2 panels at each position. And so when you have 2 panels, you have longer widths extending out from the center of the tracker, and that can result in a higher panel elevation as it rotates to its highest position.
And this small project will be a single panel project?
Yes, it will.
All right. Next one on my list is impact on real estate taxes. I think Judge Slavin asked that one, if I recall correctly. Will there be, to your knowledge, any change in the tax rate for the overall industrial property where the Nelson plant is located resulting from this use?
We are not aware of any change in the tax rate of the parcel as a result of this project.
And is that because you're not converting ag to industrial or industrial to ag? It's remaining industrial?
That is correct.
All right. The next one I have in my notes relates to section D2II of the solar ordinance, which says all other fences shall be set back a minimum of 3 feet from property lines to allow non-participating landowners to farm up to property lines and for the developer to access the outside of the fence for maintenance purposes. Will that requirement be met here?
We were able to review the survey drawing, and the fence is currently located further than 3 feet from the property line.
All right. Do you know approximately how far?
It's approximately 8 feet.
All right, thank you. And then one last one. Could you please explain how the hydrogen portion of this project qualifies as a power generation or industrial manufacturing plant?
So the hydrogen is required, as I discussed previously with the generators. They require hydrogen cooling. That's the type of generator that we've utilized. So one of the uses of this hydrogen will be utilized in the production of electricity by providing the cooling medium within the combustion turbine electrical generators. In addition, we expect that this hydrogen, some portion of the hydrogen, would be shipped off-site, used by third parties in fuel cells to generate electricity. In addition, another option that we're evaluating is the use of hydrogen as a replacement for a portion of the natural gas that is currently utilized in the Nelson Energy Center. So we would be able to inject that hydrogen into the natural gas stream where it would be combusted within the combustion turbine.
Judge Slavin, I believe that's all I have.
Great. All right, let's go around the horn. Mr. Boonstra? Questions, thank you. Ms. Duffy, if you're with us, do you have any questions?
None at the time.
Ms. Henkel?
You talked about Invenergy having an existing stormwater management plan. Does it account for this project?
It does. So
Would you be able to provide a copy of that to the office, our office?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Forster?
Questions?
Mr. Burrow?
Is any of this project a new type of system that the government is currently working on with the solar work, or is this something new that your company alone is doing?
Are you referring to the solar portion of the project?
Well, the solar hydro, well, the combination. Is anybody else in the country working on something like this?
I don't have direct knowledge, but yes, there are other entities that are looking at pairing renewables with hydrogen. There's 3 types of hydrogen that were discussed on Monday. There's the traditional method of, I think, called gray hydrogen, which is using natural gas to produce hydrogen. And what we're looking at is green hydrogen. So in order to be qualified as green hydrogen, you need to create your hydrogen using an energy resource that is not created with fossil fuels. So you're looking at teaming it with wind, hydrogen, or another renewable resource. Some are looking, call it, nuclear or hydro could be utilized. But in this case, really, you're looking at an expansion of the system utilizing primarily wind and solar. So
Is any of your work subsidized by the government like the other solar panels, solar farms are?
to my knowledge, all solar installations are qualify for a tax credit associated with their construction at this time.
Oh, it's similar to the other ones?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all, thanks.
Because I felt bad the other day, Mr. Meyer.
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Pratt?
Go back to the waivers. The one waiver, the modification to the SCS. You've stated twice now that the panels will stay below 10 foot at the highest point. And as you make modifications to them panels, are you saying they will always stay under 10 foot?
What we're saying is the ordinance requires that they be less than 20 feet. And so we would always be in compliance with the ordinance. We're not asking for a waiver from the existing criteria within the ordinance.
So then your statement that they'll be under 10 foot at all points is as it's built, not after modifications.
Our intention, yes, as we're planning the project now and engineering it, the panels will be below 10 feet. The expectation in the future is we would replace trackers with, similar arrangements. When we replace the panels, we likely leave the trackers and we would see a similar configuration.
Think I have anything else?
Bothie.
Question.
Few. Just a couple of minor ones. Going back to the waiver of the UL. A couple of the pieces that you're looking at, the trackers on the full trackers, and that's expected. Those are expected to have UL by July of 22.
Based on the information we've been provided from Next Tracker, that's what they've told us.
Okay. And how soon are you going to be ready to be submitting for, assuming approval, how soon will it take for the engineering and other things to be done so that you could submit for the building permit?
So the engineering is currently underway. I would expect in the next 60 days that we would have a package ready that we could submit for building permit.
Okay. So that's prior to July of 22. I think there's other models currently available that you could put onto those trackers. Is there any reason you can't put on, for example, using the 45 to 65? Is there any reason you couldn't use that in the interim until you got the UL approval?
It would be inefficient to install one type of optimizer and then replace it with another type of optimizer. And the intention is to test this because we'd like to, when it formally rolls out, to be able to consider it in our other facilities.
Okay. And then when you're looking at equipment upgrades or modifications,
Mhm.
you expect to have UL approval before you put those upgrades in place?
I would say it's possible, but I don't have the best crystal ball in the world to understand. It could be a similar situation where a manufacturer approaches us and says, here is a product which, they're similar situation. They're going through UL certification. Would you like to demonstrate its use to see how it operates, how it performs? We could install that particular product here and see if it makes sense for us to utilize it at larger scales. So I can't sit here and say absolutely that everything that we might consider installing, given that this is intended to be our demonstration project for solar technologies, that it would be immediately UL certified. What we can say is that the equipment would all be designed and manufactured to the applicable codes and standards, which is what the UL is ultimately certifying that the equipment meets.
But if it's upgrades or modification to a system that's already in operation, is there any real reason that you couldn't wait until those upgrades or modifications had the UL certification?
You could wait. It potentially decreases the value of the demonstration facility if you're waiting longer, where we would have the opportunity to test that product to see how it works and how it could be deployed in our larger generation fleet.
Okay. I think that's it. My first question is, you mean Invenergy didn't invest in the Tesla crystal ball?
If I had done that, I wouldn't be here.
A couple comments first, and then I have just a few follow-up questions. Please, I hope you and your staff understand that the nature of the job here is to give the ZBA the evidence it needs to decide whether the ordinances met or not met in particular circumstances. I feel a duty and obligation to help do that.
Great.
The other thing that sort of came up the other day was this isn't a meeting, a classic meeting. It's a public hearing. So telling people something later doesn't do the job. That's outside the definition of the public hearing. Whether or not there's any people listening tonight, interested parties, really is neither here nor there. They may read the transcript later, but when you say public hearing, the public has the right to hear what's said about the ordinance during the process. Okay. And most of my questions tonight are pretty picky. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think wouldn't you be asking for a waiver from the requirement to follow a Lee County Soil Water Conservation District recommendations, because they won't make any recommendations because it's farmland. Does that sound correct?
I think what you're asking the answer is yes.
Okay. Yeah. Wouldn't you also be asking, technically speaking again, for a waiver from the requirement in the ordinance that a PPA contract be in place at the time of building permit was issued? I think everybody understands the process you're going through, but you'd be asking for a waiver from that as well. Is that right? No, PPA, power purchase agreement.
Yeah. So in this instance, the power purchase is essentially internal to the project. The expectation is the power that's generated by the solar energy system is then consumed in our electrolyzer.
No, I understand that. I mean, the PPA you contemplate with ComEd.
Okay, so with ComEd, it's a net metering program.
Right.
And
so there wouldn't be a power purchase agreement for the excess power you put on the grid?
So it would be, because it's small scale, it would be a tariff-based agreement. So as a distribution company, if you meet the various standards for, self-generation, and if you have excess energy, there's a tariff that specifies how you're compensated for that power that you actually send to the grid.
PPA.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Back to this picky thing, and I'm not sure that anybody here knows why it's even in the ordinance. Maybe Alice does, but back to this, the ordinance has a requirement that you disclose how much water you'd use to clean the SES components. We went over it with Steve, Lil. Do we have a follow-up on that? How much water would be used?
So we don't have great numbers because we don't clean our panels, is what Steve said. So the low number resulted from, discussing, well, what would we do if we clean the panels? What we wouldn't do is, and what I think in people's minds is, we go out there with a pressure washer and just go crazy and spray water on the panels. It would actually be more of like washing windows, where you would think of the guys on the skyscrapers in downtown Chicago,
Right.
wiping the windows down and taking a squeegee and clean it. It would be more that type of process. So is 50 gallons per year the right number? No, but is it a significant number? It would be a small amount of water if we chose to go clean those panels, because it would be a very deliberate process.
Well, because the ordinance requires that. Is the 50 gallons, was the 50 gallons a typo and meant per module or?
It's definitely not per module.
Okay.
I mean, think of it as taking a rag and a bucket, wiping it on the panel, and then squeegeeing the panel off. You're not going to use 50 gallons. If we wanted to say a gallon per panel, you know, we would be well below that number if we clean the
You say a
panels.
gallon per panel, that's what it is. Yeah. And then Mr. Blazer asked you about the tax rate. Regardless of the tax rate, I think my question really was, are you aware if there will be any increase in valuation of the property? And the tax rate set by the county clerk in valuation of the property because of the addition of this SBA.
I would expect there would be a small incremental increase in the assessment of the overall. If you looked at the entire property, there would be a small assessment increase.
I mean, you wouldn't be doing it if it didn't add some value, right?
Right. I mean, and you have to look at the tax code, what's personal property,
Right.
what's considered
I-
real property. Energy systems get treated differently in Illinois than,
Okay. All right. Let me just check my notes, but I think that's. All right. Would you want any follow up, Mr. Blazer?
No, sir. I think you covered it all for me.
Okay. You may step down. Thanks.
Thank you, Honor.
And Your Honor, subject to providing the Nelson Stormwater Management Plan, I believe that's all we have.
All right. Very good. Ms. Duffy, if you can still hear me, do you want to produce any evidence at this hearing?
I don't have any.
How about you? Oh,
I have none.
well, okay. It's kind of asking a question with no purpose, but any interested parties want to present their own testimony or the testimony of any witnesses? Yeah, Jonathan? All right, hearing none. We're at the final stage. Mr. Blazer, if you would like to sum up, now is the time.
Thank you, Judge Slavin. I'm certainly not going to repeat either what I said at the beginning or what the witnesses have said. I believe we've established, number one, compliance with all of the relevant provisions of the Lee County zoning ordinance, and established why we're asking for the particular waivers that we're requesting. I suppose the one point I'd like to make, and this is probably directed more at Mr. Boonstra and Judge Slavin than at the rest of you, but I hope through the couple of the initial questions that I asked Mr. Schroeder, you understand why we view a waiver as appropriate here rather than seeking a variance. We simply don't believe from both a legal and practical perspective that a variance is the appropriate mechanism here for addressing what we're seeking. By and large, the things that we're asking be waived simply don't apply to this project, either because of the nature of the project or the nature of the property being industrial versus agricultural. The only one that falls somewhat outside that is the one involving UL certification, and that one is not permanent like variances are. It is simply temporary until we have it, but circumstances being what they are, we're requesting it now so that this project can proceed forward expeditiously. Otherwise, for example, with just the grading-free trackers, we'd have to wait potentially until the first half of 2023, and this industry is proceeding at light speed. So with all that said, we hope we've answered all your questions. We certainly have tried to, and we look forward to and hope that we will receive from you a positive recommendation to the Lee County Board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the next stage of the proceedings is for the Lee County Board to find facts, following their findings of fact, to make recommendations. In order to do that, one of my duties is to provide them alternatives as to motions they can make for consideration by the whole of the board. I can't really do that until all the evidence is in, so it is now, but it takes me a few days, hopefully just a few days to do that. Today is Wednesday. I hope that I can get at least half of those done by Monday. So is the 21st still, I had yeses for everybody. Is Monday, let me put it this way. Is there anybody who's now unable to join us on Monday, the 21st? All right, very good. I will try and get what motions I can. The findings of fact and recommendations, our experience has been takes 2 nights. I wonder if we could do this in 1 night, but I'm not sure enough yet. So I will get those alternative motions to you gentlemen as soon as I can. Hopefully, well, I know it's going to be over the weekend. I hope by Saturday, but I won't promise. So we'll see you Monday night, 6 o'clock here, 3rd floor, Old Lee County Courthouse. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Kelly. Oh, thank you.